Hello everyone, and welcome to my CBS Y&R Full Today channel. Please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The prison visitation room was unusually quiet when Diane Jenkins walked through the heavy doors, but there was something about the silence that immediately made her uneasy. She had expected Kyle to be angry, confused, perhaps even unwilling to speak about the past, but she never imagined that one emotional moment could threaten everything she had rebuilt with her son. Kyle had insisted on coming alone at first, claiming he needed answers that only Patty Williams could provide, yet Diane could not shake the feeling that something deeper was happening. She had spent years fighting to prove that she belonged in Kyle's life, surviving accusations, betrayals, and the constant suspicion that followed her wherever she went. Now, as she watched Kyle approach the visitation area, Diane suddenly felt as though the ground beneath her was disappearing. Patty sat behind the glass with an unsettling calmness, her eyes fixed on Kyle as though she had been waiting for this exact moment. The woman who had once terrified Genoa City looked almost fragile now, but Diane knew better than to underestimate her. Patty had always possessed a disturbing ability to reach into people's deepest wounds, and Kyle was carrying more emotional scars than he wanted anyone to see. Kyle stopped several feet away from the table. For several seconds, neither he nor Patty spoke. His expression changed as memories he had tried to bury seemed to rush back into his mind. Patty tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made Kyle uncomfortable. Then she whispered his name. That single word broke through the wall Kyle had built around himself. He stepped forward, his breathing becoming uneven, and suddenly the confident Abbott air disappeared. Instead, Diane saw a wounded son searching for something he could not explain. Kyle's eyes filled with tears. Patty reached toward him instinctively, and before anyone could stop him, Kyle rushed forward and embraced her. The hug was shocking enough, but what happened next left Diane devastated. Kyle buried his face against Patty and cried, "Mommy." The word seemed to echo through the room. Diane froze. She stared at her son as though she had just witnessed something impossible. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She had always known Patty represented a complicated part of Kyle's childhood and family history, but hearing Kyle call Patty Mommy was something Diane could never have prepared herself to hear. It was not necessarily a declaration of loyalty, and it did not automatically mean Kyle had chosen Patty over Diane, but emotionally, the moment felt like a knife twisting into Diane's heart. Patty herself appeared stunned. For perhaps the first time, the woman who had manipulated so many people did not seem to know what to say. Her hands trembled as she held Kyle. She whispered that she had missed him, even though she knew the relationship between them was tangled in years of pain and confusion. Kyle pulled back and looked directly into her eyes. He admitted that he did not understand why he had said that word. He said he had spent years trying to separate childhood memories from the stories other people had told him. He remembered fear. He remembered confusion. He remembered adults making decisions around him while nobody bothered to explain what was happening. And somewhere inside all of those memories was Patty. Kyle confessed that he had sometimes wondered whether his feelings toward her were really his own or whether they had been shaped by everything he had heard growing up. That confession made the situation even more complicated. Kyle was not simply choosing Patty. He was trying to understand himself. Outside the room, Diane struggled to maintain her composure. She had followed Kyle because she knew something about this visit could change him, but she never expected to hear that word. "Mommy." Diane repeated it silently, as tears began filling her eyes. She remembered every moment when she had fought to reconnect with Kyle. She remembered the rejection, the suspicion, the accusations that she was only pretending to care. She remembered trying to become the mother she believed Kyle deserved, even when she knew she could never erase the mistakes of the past. Now she was watching him embrace another woman who represented one of the darkest chapters of his childhood. Diane's first instinct was anger, but beneath that anger was fear. She was terrified that Kyle might be emotionally vulnerable enough for Patty to manipulate him again. When Kyle finally emerged from the visitation room, Diane confronted him. She tried to remain calm, but her voice cracked when she asked why he had called Patty mommy. Kyle immediately saw the pain in her face. He told Diane that he had not planned to say it. He had not gone into the prison intending to forgive Patty or replace anyone. The words simply came out. Diane demanded to know whether he really considered Patty his mother. Kyle shook his head, explaining that the situation was more complicated than that. He told Diane that sometimes a person can have memories attached to someone without understanding what those memories mean. He said Patty represented a part of his childhood that he had never properly confronted. He wasn't asking Diane to accept Patty, and he certainly wasn't asking her to forgive what Patty had done. He was simply trying to understand why he still felt something when he saw her. That answer did little to calm Diane. She told Kyle that Patty had hurt people, destroyed lives, and crossed boundaries that should never have been crossed. She reminded him that emotions could be manipulated, especially when someone was dealing with childhood memories. Kyle listened, but he also pushed back. He said Diane was making the same mistake everyone else had made by deciding what he was supposed to feel. Diane was stunned. Kyle's words struck deeper than he realized. For years, Diane had believed that protecting her son meant controlling the threats around him. But now Kyle was telling her that he needed space to make his own emotional decisions. Diane finally admitted that she was afraid. She was afraid of losing him. She was afraid that Patty would somehow find a way to get inside Kyle's head. Most importantly, she was afraid that Kyle would discover something about his past that changed how he viewed Diane forever. Kyle softened when he heard that confession. He reminded Diane that nothing about one prison visit erased their relationship. He told her that she was his mother, and no emotional reaction could change that. But he also needed Diane to understand that his past belonged to him. He could not spend the rest of his life avoiding painful memories simply because they made other people uncomfortable. Diane wanted to argue, but she knew he had a point. Still, the image of Kyle running into Patty's arms remained burned into her mind. Back inside the prison, Patty sat alone after Kyle left. She stared at the empty chair across from her and seemed overwhelmed by what had happened. She had imagined many possible reactions from Kyle, but she never expected him to call her mommy. The word gave her a dangerous sense of hope. Patty began wondering whether there was still a place for her in Kyle's life. Yet the moment could also become the beginning of another psychological battle. If Patty convinced herself that Kyle needed her, she could begin pushing boundaries again. That possibility terrified Diane. She knew Patty's history too well to believe that one emotional reunion automatically meant redemption. Meanwhile, Kyle returned to Genoa City carrying a burden he could not easily explain. He avoided questions from family members, but his behavior made everyone suspicious. Jack Abbott noticed that something was wrong almost immediately. Kyle finally admitted that he had visited Patty. Jack was visibly uncomfortable when Kyle described the encounter. He warned Kyle not to let nostalgia rewrite history. But Kyle insisted that he wasn't rewriting anything. He was confronting it. Jack understood the difference, even if he remained worried. He told Kyle that family history could be powerful enough to distort judgment, especially when painful memories were involved. Diane's emotional state deteriorated as she replayed the prison scene in her mind. She wondered whether she had failed Kyle somehow. Perhaps she had spent too much time trying to protect him from the past instead of helping him understand it. Perhaps she had underestimated how deeply his childhood experiences had affected him. She even began questioning whether her constant battles with other members of the Abbott family had made Kyle feel trapped between competing versions of his own history. For once, Diane did not know whether fighting harder was the answer. She wondered if letting go might be the only way to keep Kyle close. That realization could become the most important turning point in Diane's relationship with her son. Instead of demanding that Kyle stop seeing Patty, Diane might eventually tell him that she trusts him to make his own decisions. But that would not mean Diane would stop watching carefully. She would make it clear that if Patty crossed a line, she would intervene immediately. Kyle could appreciate that balance because he did not want another war between the adults in his life. He wanted truth. The emotional fallout also reached Summer Newman. When Kyle finally told her what happened, Summer was shocked by the word he had used. She asked whether he actually believed Patty was his mother. Kyle became frustrated and explained that the word was emotional, not literal. He told Summer that he had experienced a moment of overwhelming vulnerability. Summer understood, but she warned him that emotional vulnerability was exactly what dangerous people could exploit. Kyle admitted that this was his greatest fear. He wondered whether his visit had given Patty hope that she could become part of his life again. At the same time, Diane quietly began investigating what had been discussed during the prison visit. She did not want to invade Kyle's privacy, but her instincts told her that Patty might have said something significant. Diane suspected that Patty knew something about Kyle's early years that had never been fully revealed. If Patty had information capable of changing Kyle's understanding of his childhood, then the prison visit might have been more important than anyone realized. The possibility created an explosive question: what if Patty's emotional reaction was not simply manipulation? What if she genuinely believed she had a maternal connection with Kyle because of something that happened years ago? The answer could force the Abbott family to confront uncomfortable truths. Diane might discover that pieces of Kyle's childhood had been deliberately hidden from him. Kyle could begin questioning everyone who had ever told him the story of his early life. And Patty could suddenly become the keeper of information everyone else wanted buried. But the most powerful part of the storyline would not be whether Kyle truly chose Patty. It would be the emotional conflict inside Kyle himself. He could love Diane and still feel compassion toward Patty. He could recognize Patty's crimes while acknowledging that his childhood memories were complicated. He could refuse to excuse her actions while still wanting answers. That distinction would make the story far more personal than a simple battle between two women fighting over a son. Diane eventually found Kyle alone and sat beside him without asking questions. For once, she did not lecture him. She simply told him that she loved him. Kyle looked at her and apologized for hurting her. Diane shook her head and told him he did not need to apologize for having emotions. Then she admitted something she had never wanted to say aloud: she was scared that one day Kyle would realize she was not the mother he wanted her to be. Kyle immediately told her that she was wrong. That conversation could finally give Diane what she had been searching for all along. Not control. Not victory over Patty. Not proof that she was the better mother. What she needed was trust. Kyle needed to know that Diane would not disappear simply because he confronted his past. Diane needed to understand that loving Kyle did not mean controlling every relationship he had. Still, Genoa City rarely allows emotional peace to last. Patty's prison status could change, new information could surface, and Kyle's unexpected reunion might inspire someone else to dig into the past. If Patty possesses a secret that has never been revealed, the consequences could be enormous. Diane may soon discover that the word mommy was not the end of the story. It may have been the first clue. And that is what makes this storyline so emotionally dangerous. Kyle's prison visit does not necessarily mean he has chosen Patty over Diane. It means he has opened a door that has remained locked for years. Diane may want to slam that door shut, but Kyle may finally be ready to walk through it. The question is what he will find on the other side. Will he discover painful truths that bring him closer to Diane? Or will Patty reveal something that changes the Abbott family's understanding of the past forever? And if Kyle calls Patty mommy again, will Diane finally lose control of her emotions, or will she surprise everyone by allowing her son to confront his history on his own terms? In Genoa City, one word can reopen an entire lifetime of wounds, and Kyle's emotional confession may have just started a family crisis that nobody is prepared to stop. The next morning, Genoa City was already buzzing with questions, but Kyle Abbott had no intention of giving anyone answers. He walked into the Abbott mansion before sunrise, hoping the early hour would allow him to avoid another emotional confrontation. Instead, he found Diane waiting in the living room. She had barely slept. The events of the prison visit had replayed in her mind all night, especially those 2 words that continued to haunt her, Mommy. She looked at Kyle carefully, trying to determine whether he had changed since the previous evening. Kyle immediately recognized the concern in her eyes. Mom, please, he said quietly. I don't want another argument. Diane took a breath. Neither do I. That response surprised Kyle. Diane explained that she had spent the entire night thinking about what he had told her. She finally understood that forcing him to reject Patty would only make him more defensive. Kyle listened as Diane admitted something painful. She had been so terrified of losing him that she had treated every threat to their relationship like a battle she had to win. But Kyle wasn't a child anymore. He was an adult capable of confronting painful memories himself. Kyle appreciated the honesty, but he could see that Diane was still holding something back. You're still afraid, he said. Diane looked away. Yes, she finally admitted. Because I know Patty. Kyle's expression hardened. He told Diane that he understood why she was afraid, but he needed to know exactly what she believed Patty might do. Diane explained that Patty had a history of becoming emotionally attached to people and then crossing boundaries when she felt rejected. She worried that Patty could interpret Kyle's emotional reaction as an invitation to rebuild a relationship that might not be healthy. Kyle stared at the floor. I didn't promise her anything, he said. I know. And I didn't choose her over you. Diane's eyes immediately filled with tears. I know that too, she whispered. For a moment, mother and son simply looked at each other. The tension between them had not disappeared, but something had changed. Diane was finally allowing Kyle to make his own choices, while Kyle was beginning to understand how deeply his actions had affected her. Then Kyle revealed the one thing he had not told Diane. Patty said something before I left. Diane immediately became alert. What did she say? Kyle hesitated. She told me there was something about my childhood that nobody ever told me. Diane's expression changed instantly. What exactly did she say? Kyle explained that Patty had refused to give him details. She claimed that she wanted Kyle to come back because she didn't want to reveal something while he was emotionally overwhelmed. She wanted him to return when he was ready to hear the truth. Diane stood up. No, Kyle frowned. No what? You are not going back there. Kyle's frustration returned immediately. He accused Diane of doing exactly what she had promised not to do. She had said she trusted him, yet the moment Patty mentioned a secret, Diane wanted to take control. This isn't about control, Diane insisted. It's about what Patty is capable of. And what if she's telling the truth?
Doctor, thank you
Diane
for agreeing to come here in the last minute
that question
and performing
followed her
this
throughout the day.
extraordinary service.
Meanwhile, Patty sat inside the prison facility, thinking about Kyle's visit. She knew she had witnessed something significant. But she also understood that the word Kyle had spoken could be used as either a bridge or a weapon. For the first time, Patty wondered whether she could resist the temptation to manipulate the situation. She picked up a photograph she had kept hidden among her belongings. It was old and worn. Sharon, however, is already taking steps of her own.
Critics and the blurred vision were bad enough, but now for her to completely lose her eyesight,
so
we
she
thought she still had
creating
time.
a story that could explain away everything he has discovered. The problem is that every lie creates another lie that must eventually be protected. Sharon knows this better than anyone. She has spent enough time in Genoa City to understand that secrets rarely remain isolated. One person tells another, one piece of information connects to another, and suddenly an entire story emerges. She wonders whether she should confess before Nick uncovers the truth himself. For one brief moment, she considers calling him back and telling him everything. But then she remembers the consequences. If Nick learns the complete story, there may be no way to undo the damage. Sharon convinces herself that keeping quiet is still the safest option. Nick's investigation soon produces something unexpected. he discovers that one detail Sharon dismissed may actually